I'm Edie Lush, Executive Editor, Hub Culture, and I'm very pleased to be here with Sofia Condes, Head of Investor Outreach at the FAIRR Initiative. How are you?
Good. Great to be here with you today.
So tell me a little bit about what is making you excited at this COP.
Well, I am super excited to see that this is the first COP where we have food and agriculture front and center in the program. There's even the first food day. This is the first time, believe it or not, that COP has a full day. That will happen on the 10th of December. So that's really exciting for me because and for the work that we do at FAIRR, because it means that finally there's a realization that we will not reach net zero unless we put food and agriculture front and center of all the work that is trying to happen here at COP.
So what are you hearing from investors in terms of their capital allocation, where they're going to be putting their money based on what's happening here?
Yeah, so a couple of positive things. So first, I see a realization from investors and more of a public recognition that we cannot longer think about sustainability and commercial returns as trade-offs. I think there's more of a realization that really a lot of these opportunities that we are seeing in the transition to a more climate-aligned and nature-aligned economy will actually become the next big opportunities from an investment standpoint. So I think that's really exciting, and that also includes a lot of the food system transition that we want to see that requires that funding. Secondly, I see that investors are talking much more about implementation. So having a commitment is no longer good enough. They're actually discussing the nitty-gritty of those plans, what that plan needs to entail, and they're pushing a lot of the companies, including the largest companies in the food sector, to actually come up with really kind of no longer long-term commitments, but short-term actionable plans. So that's also really exciting. And then finally, I'm seeing much more of a commitment as well, and kind of from investors, to really dedicate resources and funding to working more closely with governments in funding some of those opportunities that require blended finance, that require collaboration with public funding mechanisms.
Are you seeing enough money being allocated to where it needs to go? Because we know that trillions every year needs to go to emerging markets in order to help their transition. Are you seeing the commitment and the implementation of that kind of investment?
Well, we're seeing progress, but it's not nearly where it's supposed to be. So just to give you an example, only 4% of climate finance is going to the food and agriculture sector. That's not nearly enough, considering that the sector is responsible for more than a third of global emissions. So we would need to see that 4% number to go up drastically.
To where?
I mean, we need trillions, right? And that means that if a sector is responsible for a third of emissions, I mean, at a minimum, a third of the funding should be going to that sector. So we need more of that, and I think there needs to be like investment on kind of the whole value chain and on within different asset classes. So for example, we're seeing a lot of the venture capital funds that are supporting some of those early stage ventures that are taking off, they're funding like the big innovations. We're seeing a lot of our investor members at FAIRR that are mostly invested in public companies, listed companies. They're pushing those companies to really kind of reallocate their capex towards some of the innovations and solutions. But third, I think like there's a realization that private investors can do a lot, but they can't do everything. So we also need public funding. So there's definitely been more of a conversation of how do we shift that public funding, including some of the subsidies. And FAIRR has been doing a lot of work in that space, having a conversation, for example, with G20 finance ministers around shifting some of the negative funding sources. So, and by negative, I mean that they're having a negative climate impact.
Like what? What are some of those negative funding sources?
So, for example, lots of subsidies going into monocropping or intensive livestock production. Those subsidies could be used to funding a just transition, could be used to funding some of the innovations that are needed in low and middle income countries where it's high risk. So you need some of that public investment cushioning for private investments to flow.
Okay, so I'm an investor. I want to find out more. I want to get involved. What can I do?
So first thing is, if you're not yet a member of the FAIRR Initiative, I do invite you to join our network. We are a network of global investors, and we're there really kind of to bring all of the data, the research, and the tools that investors need to be able to navigate the complexity of the food sector. And secondly, pay more attention to the food sector. This is not only a risk for your portfolio if you're not paying attention, but it might be the best investment opportunity for the transition that we want to see in this COP28.
Thank you so much, Sofia, for stopping by at Hub Culture, and thank you guys for your partnership. I'm Edie Lush.